This is a video about one of Happy Hardcore's legends, a man who fought against illegal downloads, whose first gig was called the Mega Rave, and someone who's considered to be one of the most important people in the Scottish music scene, certainly the Scottish rave scene. But why is Scott Brown the man with 38 aliases? That's what I try and figure out in this video. But before we get to the good stuff, please slap the subscribe button so you don't have to remember at the end, when I'd appreciate it if you give us a like and drop us a comment. Let's get into it. Allow me to introduce Scott Alexander Brown, DJ, producer, label boss and patriotic Scotchman. A massive name in both UK and Dutch hardcore, Scott is considered to be one of the most important people in the Scottish music scene. To me, Scott Brown is bouncy techno and gabber. Great memories on the dance floor, when I could go all night without needing a power nap halfway through. And plain toilet selfies, a highlight of my Facebook feed for a while. Scott was born in December of 1972. His hometown was Glasgow, and after leaving school in 1990, he went on to study physics at Glasgow's Caledonia University. There he met Gordon Anderson, and the pair decided to spend all of their university money on synths and started to write rave music in Scott's bedroom at home. Eventually, they were picked up by 23rd Precinct Records in Glasgow, and that's where we pick up the video. The first alias that Scott had was... The year is 1991, and Scott Brown is studying physics. But rather than go off to work on the Hadron Collider with Brian Cox, he chose to follow a creative passion in music, and together with Gordon Anderson formed a group called Q-Tex. Soon after, they added Roger Hughes to the lineup. However, he didn't stick around too long, later joining Malorca Lee to form the group Ultrasonic, another massive act in the early rave and hardcore days. By 1993, joined by Alan Todd and vocalist Gillian Tennant, the band went on to have chart success with hits such as Believe and Power of Love. Todd brought the iconic 303 sound, and Anderson brought the stuff around the sides. Brown was the fingers man because they generally wrote the music at his house, so were around his equipment. Tennant wrote and powerfully delivered the vocals, and the four took great pride in bringing both the commercial and the hardcore sound to their fans. It was thanks to the forward-thinking label that was 23rd Precinct Records, who gave them a platform to showcase their talents on. Although they had no real desire for chart success, after a few underground releases, the label nudged them in that direction. Their debut entry into the charts was the anthem Power of Love, which peaked at number 65 in the UK charts and 13th in the Scottish charts. When they re-released it in 1997, it had even greater success, hitting 49th in the UK chart and 10th in the Scottish. The highest entry into the UK charts was Let the Love, maxing out at the 30th position, while in the Scottish charts, Believe was their most popular track, gaining the second spot in 1996. The band toured Europe and had an adoring fan base until they eventually split up and went off to work on other projects. Well, kind of anyway. In 2005, Scott Brown presenting Cutex released The Reason, with the B-side being F Your Style by Scott Brown. When you look at the credits on the A-side by Cutex, it credits Scott Brown and Gillian Tennant. This makes the Discogs entry for this particular release look something like this. That's the last release I can find for Cutex, apart from a new remix of Power of Love included on Evolution Records, the Remixes Volume 3. I guess 2005 is where this story ended. As this video is about aliases, it's worth mentioning that Cutex also went by the alias Equation for at least 2 EP releases in 1993. Not all of the band were credited on these EPs, with Anderson, Todd and Brown being credited on the Cyberflux EP, and only Anderson and Brown on their Hardcore Nation Part 2 EP. Can't find a Part 1. Was there even a Part 1? Equally strange is that on the label for the Cyberflux EP, it states that it was written and produced by Cutex. I could see this rabbit hole is going to get us very, very dizzy. Seems Scott Brown has always had a thing for multiple names. We'll have another look at him very soon, but first there's a couple of other aliases that I want to talk about. While both Cutex and of course Scott Brown are the main ways we know our tartan techno legend, there were a few others that I could have done a piece on in this video, but I didn't fancy banging on for an hour, and I'm sure you wouldn't have listened for that long anyway. It seems Mr. Brown was trying to get some kind of Guinness World Record or something. The other names that you could say are the more well-known ones are Plus System, with anthems like God's Child and Blue Anthem, Interstate, the group with hits such as Hardcore Hustler, and Bass X, the band consisting of both Scott and his brother Stuart Brown. I've seen it again. So on the Bass X release for Hardcore Disco, it claims that the tracks are engineered by Q-Tex. Pilgrim 2000 is another example of us being surrounded by Scots. It's Bass X versus Scott Brown, giving Scott and Stuart Brown versus Scott Brown. Here I see it more as an idea the pair put together and then Scott went away and turned it into a banger. But surely that's still just Bass X. If one did more than the other, then okay, yeah, maybe there's that. But they're still in the same band. I did see something else while researching for this video, on the label for the Bass Nation release, where it states that Evolution Records requires no nuisance calls and has no need for new dancers. Back to Scott Brown now then? Well no, actually, there's more. In total I counted 38 aliases that Scott's used over the years. I've already mentioned the more well-known ones, and there's so many more than that, some as collaborative projects and groups, others as solo acts. According to Discogs, Brown was a member of 14 groups. In addition to that, he had a further 24 solo aliases. And yes, that includes the one that he used as a DJ before returning to his real name, DJ Equation. Sound familiar? So Equation was the alias used by Q-Tex, who we now know were a hardcore and rave band formed by Scott Brown. And DJ Equation was the name used by Scott before he became known as Scott Brown. I think I need to sit down. Enough with all the names, let's have another look at the man himself. So we've learned quite a bit about Scott already, just in a whole range of different names and bands. He was born in Glasgow and moved to Cumbernauld when he was around 5 years old after attending Hag Hill Public School for a short time, which looks nothing like it did now. He now lives in the north of England, in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, and has continued to put out banging music and played at countless events over the years. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and rewind back to 1993, where Scott finds himself in a meeting in front of music distributors because the checks he was supposed to be receiving never turned up. Scott was quickly discovering the darker side of the music industry, with a few labels not paying the money they owed him. So he arranged a meeting with Delta Distribution to discuss his options. At the meeting he was asked, why not set up your own label? Being 20 years old and relatively new to the game, he didn't realise that this was an option. So he did, and Evolution Records was born. This allowed Scott full creative and ultimately financial control over his work until Delta Distribution went bust owing Scott money. That didn't stop him, however, as he picked himself up, found another distributor and continued to put out top quality music. Not only was Scott able to produce a consistent stream of new tunes, he also started receiving a lot of demos as people were eager to get a release on Evolution Records. This led to the creation of sub-label Evolution Gold to release new music from up-and-coming talents. Now Evolution Records is listed to have 13 sub-labels, meaning that Scott has had his hand in at least 14 record labels, including Twisted Vinyl, the label that started in the summer of 1994, specialising in gabba and the harder styles. Poosh started shortly after the demise of another Scottish label, Shoop, and Evolved, specifically created to cater to new remixes of classic tracks from various Evolution labels. Scott not only released his music on Evolution Records and 23rd Precinct, His music was also released through the labels Core and Bass Generator Records, and Dutch labels Baby Boom, Rotterdam Records, Dwarf and Mokum. Brown was also celebrated in the Hardcore Heaven Awards and was the first hardcore DJ to receive the Best Hardcore DJ Award in 2005. He later went on to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 2013 Hardcore Heaven Awards. He's worked at countless events, including Fantasia and Resurrection, the one that he's probably most well known for. Scott receives approximately 140,000 monthly Spotify plays, but he wasn't always a big fan of the MP3. In 2006, alongside other big names such as Hixie, Cyan Unknown and Brisk and Ham, Brown formed a new organisation called PAID, Producers Against Illegal Downloads. They took a stand against peer-to-peer and other file-sharing sites, and encouraged others from the scene to do the same. Did it make a difference? Possibly not in the grand scheme of things, but what I did see later on was a shift in the way that Scott himself viewed illegal downloads. In an interview for the BBC short documentary Scotland the Rave, he admits that it's all marketing and getting the brand or name out. Whichever name that might be, Mr. Brown. So why all the different names? I did try and ask the man himself, however I guess he's just a little too busy for little old me. There are many reasons a DJ might choose to use different aliases, but do any of them make sense for Scott Brown? Some DJs change the name because the original one wasn't marketable enough, so they choose another one or someone gives them a nudge in the right direction. This one definitely doesn't work for Scott because his name is probably one of the biggest names in hardcore. Others might change the name when they completely change sound and put the old one to bed. Scott Brown is still very much around, releasing new music and tearing up dance floors with his own sound that seems to have evolved rather than changed. When producers want to expand on their sound, say to produce happy hardcore and gabber, they may use aliases to make a distinction between the different styles. We saw this last month with brisk and stimulant DJs. We've also seen DJs use aliases to release music anonymously when they want to try a different sound. Again, this doesn't really work for Scott Brown because he's released happy hardcore, bouncy techno, trancecore and gabber all under his own name. So what is the real reason that Scott used so many aliases? The nearest I came to an answer was on Mallorca Lee's XL podcast and an interview with Scott from back in March this year. He describes that he would wake up in the morning and by 10 o'clock have a completed track and be moving on to the next. At that speed, he's going to be knocking out 3 or 4 tracks every day. With so much music flowing out of you, you'd need an outlet. Or several, and it might look rather strange to see an artist with 10,000 releases all under their own name. So in a similar way to Brisk and Ham, where they had too much material for one label, Scott had too much material for one name. The question left in my mind at the end of this is there any pattern to those names? Or is it just who Scott felt like being as he opened his computer and sipped his coffee in the morning? What do you think? Did Scott Brown go overboard on the number of names he used? Even if you just count the solo ones, 24 is a bit much, right? Thank you for watching my video. I hope you found it as interesting as I did looking into the life of one of hardcore's heroes. It's December and with Christmas coming, I'm making my preparations. For the first time in 3 years, I'm going to be spending Christmas with my family this year. And so that I can enjoy it, I'm going to take a month off. I know, right? Does 4 videos and then takes a break. As I won't be releasing a video next month, I'm going to go one better for you. Been teasing this too long now. Coming to a screen near you, February 1st. It's the video you've all been waiting for. It's time I looked at Hixie. I do have a plan for the video, and the only thing I'm going to reveal right now is it's going to be another double. No, you're not getting any more from me now. If you want to find me between now and then, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Stuart-K Music. The Scott Brown DJ mix is available right now over on my Mixcloud. Please do head over and have a listen. I'm doing a hardcore year mix for 2022 and it's going to be released over on Mixcloud later on this month. So head on over there and give us a little follow over there so you can be notified of that one. Please hit the subscribe button, give the video a like and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had an alias? Have a great Christmas and I'll see you in the new year.